All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So, welcome everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us in this Upkeep account setup and best practices session. So, my name's Alex. I'm a member of the customer success team here at Upkeep, and today we're going to go through how to do account setup and some of the best practices around that. So, we'll talk about setting up your locations and assets and parts of equipment within Upkeep. We'll start figuring out how to set up work orders, set up preventative maintenance, and all that good stuff. So, as far as our agenda is concerned for today, I do want to start things off just by covering some of the Upkeep support resources that are available to you all. We'll then jump into navigating Upkeep and we'll actually go through some user types and actually go into a live demo of the platform so we can get ourselves familiar with all the features that are available. And then we'll finish up by covering account setup and best practices. That's why we're here. So, like I said, we're going to talk about how to set up your locations, how to set up your assets, some of the best practices around how we might want to be naming our locations and our assets. We'll talk about setting up teams, and then finally cover work orders and preventative maintenance. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Like I mentioned, just wanted to make you folks aware of some of the additional upkeep support resources that are available to you all. Of course, we have a live support team based in Los Angeles, where I'm located, as well as based in the UK. You can reach out to us by email, of course. You can always give us a call. We even have a support chat that's built directly into the Upkeep app itself. So whether you're using Upkeep on your mobile device or you're using Upkeep on the web, like we're going to be doing for the majority of the session today, either way, you have that ability to get in contact with our support team and have a conversation with them in real time. So just something to be aware of. We also have an Upkeep Help Center. The way I like to think about our help center is it's essentially a Wikipedia for everything and anything related to upkeep. So basically, just a really great website you can find by going to onupkeep.com. You'll then want to select resources, and then you'll select support, and you'll basically be able to search through how-to guides on how to set up your locations and set up your account. We have step-by-step instructions on how to use specific features and even some video tutorials for you to check out. So definitely check out the Help Center. Just a really great one-stop shop for all the articles and resources that you need. And last but not least, we have several other webinars in addition to this one. We offer a team training, an office hours session, a data importing session, and a monthly product updates webinar. So as far as our team training is concerned, as you can see there, the idea is that we're going to teach you how to navigate Upkeep like a pro. So unlike this introduction to Upkeep webinar that we're on today, this team training is much more geared towards folks who've already set up their account and they're ready to start using all the features to their full potential. So this is really going to be a deep dive into Upkeep. We're going to cover all the features that are available, all the different ways in which you can use these features based on the industry that you're in or based on your line of business. Really great for teams. You can always sign up and check it out. It's happening twice a day at 10 a.m. Eastern and 10 a.m. Pacific. If you're not able to make it, even though you've signed up, no worries. Just by signing up, you'll basically receive a recording of that session. So just something to keep in mind. We also offer an office hours session. This is really your chance to hop on a webinar with us and actually ask whatever questions come to mind. So it's basically the opportunity to speak with a product specialist like myself in a live Q&A forum. So definitely check that out if you have some questions specific to the way in which your teams are using the app. Maybe you're struggling with certain features and you can ask questions related to those. And somebody like myself will be more than happy to answer those questions and essentially walk you through those answers in a live session. So definitely check that out every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific. We also do a data importing webinar. Basically, with Upkeep, we give you the ability to import as well as mass update all of the data that you're tracking. So whether it's your locations, your assets, parts and inventory, work orders, you name it, you have the ability to take information that exists in a spreadsheet and basically upload it all at once into Upkeep. So maybe you're coming from another tool and starting to use Upkeep for the first time, or maybe you've actually been tracking all of your location related data, all of your asset related data in a spreadsheet already. Well, basically all you have to do is just make a few changes to that spreadsheet so that it fits our template, and then you can upload all of your locations and all of your assets at once. So definitely something, if you're checking out this introduction to Upkeep and you're mainly interested for account setup, maybe you're using Upkeep for the first time, definitely would recommend also checking out that data importing webinar because it's going to go through how to mass import all of your data, especially if that data already exists in a spreadsheet somewhere. So check that out. That's every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific. And then last, but certainly not least, we have our monthly product updates webinar. This is going to be on the fourth Wednesday of every month at 10 a.m. Pacific. And basically, what our monthly product updates covers are our monthly product updates. So we talk about all the latest and greatest features that have been coming out and are now available to you in Upkeep. We'll talk about some recent features that have come out. We'll also talk about some big features that have come out within the past couple months, just to make sure that you folks are aware. And then last but not least, we also cover some of the product roadmaps. We go over some features that you can expect to see in the near future. So definitely a very worthwhile session. Only happens once a month, so don't miss it. Again, that fourth Wednesday, essentially the last Wednesday of every month at 10 a.m. Pacific. All right. So let's get to the good stuff. Let's start talking about navigating Upkeep. And just the thing to keep in mind today as we go through all these key features in Upkeep, all of them have really been designed to help your team increase its productivity. And this is really by doing the following. First and foremost, as we're setting up our account, the idea here is that we're using Upkeep to stay organized. This means that all of your vital info, your locations, your assets, work orders, team communication, everything's going to be in the same place so that Upkeep becomes that one-stop shop for you for everything maintenance related. So no more having to, put things down on post-it notes and no more post-it notes going missing or trying to figure out which spreadsheet had the information that you're looking for. At the end of the day, we want to make it so that Upkeep is that one place where everything's located and organized for you to find. Now, once that happens and your team starts using Upkeep on a daily basis, this is really going to help standardize your workflow. This means that all of your requests are going to be filtering into the same place for approval. Whenever they get approved, they turn into a work order and get assigned a technician. And so as a result, your teams are going to have a really clear process on how to create and manage work orders and essentially do maintenance. Now, as your teams utilize the app more and more, Upkeep's going to be continuously tracking all of your data for reporting purposes. So this means accurate reports that are going to give your managers a great bird's eye perspective into what's going on within your organization. You're going to know where time is being spent, where costs are being spent, and the idea is we're going to help you make better predictive decisions as an organization. And so once we start doing that, that's where really preventative maintenance is going to come into play. And with preventative maintenance, the idea is that we're giving you the ability to set preventative maintenance activities in place based on a recurring schedule or a meter reading. So this is going to help you reduce your asset downtime, save time and money, and at the end of the day, it's really going to help you get ahead of your maintenance. So instead of working in a reactive world of waiting for things to break and going and fixing them, waiting for more things to break and going and fixing them. We want to help you get ahead of that asset downtime. So we're doing maintenance ahead of time to prevent these assets from breaking in the first place. And then last but not least is mobility. Definitely a very core centric aspect of the Upkeep platform. The idea is with the Upkeep mobile app, all of your info is right at your fingertips at any time, and you can complete work wherever you go. So this is going to be especially important for your technicians who are out in the field and generally not working out of a desktop. Now, what I want to do next is just kind of briefly go through some of the Upkeep user types. So our first one is admins. And basically, you can imagine that as an admin, these are folks who are going to have full control over the account. You can, of course, have multiple admins in your account, but the idea here is an admin is going to be somebody who's responsible for account setup. They're going to be approving work orders and delegating and prioritizing work orders amongst the team. They're going to be able to create work orders as well. They'll be creating and approving purchase orders. So yeah, they basically have full edit access. These are essentially your power users within Upkeep. We then have our technicians, and there's actually two different roles of techs. We have this concept of a quote unquote regular technician, and then we also have a limited technician. Now, with a regular technician, these are folks who are going to be able to create and process and manage work orders that get assigned to them. They're going to be able to see everything that's happening within the organization from a work order standpoint. So they're going to be able to see all of the team's work orders. They can also create parts and assets as well. So basically, in other words, regular technicians are going to be getting assigned work orders of their own, but they can also work on other people's work orders as well. So if there's a technician who's sick one day, another technician is going to be able to step in and work on the work orders that have been assigned to that sick colleague. Now, with limited technicians, these are folks who have all the same, functionality as a regular technician. The only difference is that these folks are only able to see work orders that are assigned to them. So this is really this is particularly useful for certain technicians who you're trying to help control the scope, trying to prevent them from being overwhelmed. Also, very great use case for maybe you have contractors who come on site a couple days a week or a couple hours a week, and you don't want them to be able to see everything that's taking place within your maintenance organization. You just want them to be able to see the work orders that have been assigned to them. Well, you could set them up with that limited technician license for a day, and basically allow them to only see the work that they need to get done. And then last but not least, we have our view only and our requester users. Now, the thing to keep in mind here is with your admins and technicians, these are going to be folks who require a license. So admins and technicians require a license. On the flip side, you can have as many view only and requester users as you want at no additional cost. So you do not need a license for your view only users or your requesters. And the reason why is because typically view only folks and requester folks, these are not folks on your team who are actually going to be doing the maintenance on a day-to-day basis. But that being said, from a requester standpoint, these are folks who potentially work within the facility or they work, you know, at the job site where maintenance is being done, and we want to empower them to be able to make requests for work orders when they see that something's broken or something's not behaving properly. Our view only users, these are folks who are able to submit work order requests, and they're also able to see all of the account details as well. So they're not necessarily going to be able to take action on anything, but they do have that higher level purview into everything that's taking place within Upkeep. So this is really great for folks like, your chief of operations or somebody who sits on a high level, again, who's not necessarily doing the actual maintenance on a day-to-day basis, but you still want to give them access to Upkeep so that they can get those insights, they can see reports and things of that nature. So pretty straightforward. Our admin users, our technicians, and then our view only and requester users who are free users. And again, you can have as many of those as you'd like. All right. So what I want to do next is go through an Upkeep general overview. I'm actually going to jump into the app itself, and we're going to go through all of these bullet points that we see here, all the different features that are available in Upkeep. So we'll talk about work orders. We'll take a look at reporting, requests, locations, equipment, assets, parts and inventory, people and teams. We'll talk about how you can send messages to your team directly from the Upkeep app itself. And then we'll actually even cover the Contact Us button, and I'll show you how you can get in contact with our team through that live support chat feature. So let's actually jump right into the app. And the first thing that we'll see is our work orders page. So this is where all the magic happens. This is a list of all of the work orders for my company here. Um, in fact, it's actually not all of the work orders. If we look at the filters here at the top of our screen, we can see that we're actually only looking at our open, on hold, and in progress work orders. So if I really wanted to see everything, including work orders that have been completed in the past, I can go ahead and select that very easily, and it's going to show me all of those work orders as well. Now, this filtering feature is very, very powerful in the sense that it's going to really enable us to kind of dig deep into exactly which work orders and what sort of information that we're looking for. So, maybe I actually only want to see work orders that are open. And in fact, maybe I only want to see work orders that have been assigned to a particular technician. So I can go ahead and select Joe Technician here. We're looking at all of Joe's work orders that are still open. Maybe I also want to filter by priority so I can see which work orders are specifically high priority versus low. Looks like Joe has one open high priority work order that's been assigned to him. So this is just a really powerful feature that, again, will allow you to really specify exactly what information you're looking for with regards to your work orders. We have some additional filters here. If you click on this left-hand button, where I can search for work orders that belong to a specific asset, work orders that belong to a team or to a category. I can see work orders that were created by a specific individual or maybe completed by a specific individual. And then I can even use this bottom feature here to select date ranges. So maybe I want to see all the work orders that happened last month or this year or last year, or I actually want to select a specific date range that I can look at. So definitely take advantage of this filters feature. Very powerful. It's really going to help your technicians, be able to open up Upkeep and figure out, okay, what are the work orders that are assigned to me? I know I'm at this location today, so let's also see the work orders assigned to me that are at this specific location, and so on and so forth. In fact, if I actually end up using a filter pretty frequently, maybe I find myself setting up the same filter over and over again every day. Well, what you can do is actually save that filter for later use. So you would click on the Save Quick Filter button right here, and those quick filters are then going to pop up right here in this Quick Filters button. So if you go ahead and click that, you can see a couple of different uh, quick filters that have been created already. All right, so that's our work orders page. And, if you wanted to create a work order, it's really just as simple as clicking on this big red button at the top right of our screen. We can go ahead and enter in a title, a description. We can add in images if we want. These could be images of the actual broken piece of equipment. They could also be images of a receipt, for example, that maybe represent some of the parts that you had to purchase. If we wanted to do preventative maintenance, that's where this recurring schedule would come into play. So I could have this work order occurring every day at a specific time, every week at a specific time, every 2 weeks. I can get really custom with it. So if I want a work order to happen on a Monday and a Tuesday of every week, for example, or a Monday and a Tuesday 1 week out of the month, you can get pretty creative with that. So just something to keep in mind there. That is essentially how you would take this work order, put it on a recurring schedule, and essentially turn it into a preventative maintenance work order. We also have the ability to set our work orders to categories. These categories are customizable, so a lot of them come out of the box when you first start using Upkeep, but we do have the ability to basically go in and add whatever custom categories we want as well. So maybe you're going to be using this for budgeting purposes. Maybe you're trying to see where money is being spent by categorizing your work orders based on whether they're related to plumbing or related to electrical or emergency or so on and so forth. We can also, of course, assign this work order to a technician. We can add in some additional workers that we want to have visibility into this work order as well. Teams, locations, assets. So this work order might be related to a specific asset, and I can go ahead and select that asset or search for it. And then we can also add in some form fields, which is basically a fancy way of saying we can add in custom checklists into this work order. All right, so that's our work orders in a nutshell. We won't spend too much time here. I just want to give everybody a high level overview into all of the features that we have available in Upkeep. So we also have our reporting tab. And like I mentioned earlier, as we use Upkeep over time, really in the background, Upkeep is collecting all of this data related to our closed work orders. What were some of the costs and time that were added into those work orders? We're going to be able to summarize all of that information in these reports that we see here. So we have our leaderboard, which I kind of like to think of almost like a productivity board, where it's taking all of our work orders, breaking them down by which user they've been assigned to, which locations they've been assigned to. We also have these frequency graphs here off to the right, so I'm able to not only see how many work orders my colleague Miji is completing, but also the frequency at which they're being completed as well. Same thing goes for locations, assets, so we can see which work orders have been assigned to which assets, teams, categories, requests. We can even see which parts are out of stock as well as which ones are running low. I also have the ability to switch things up and check out this dashboard here. This dashboard is going to be very similar to our work orders page in the sense that we're going to be using filters as a way to break down the specific information that we're looking for here. So on this screen, we can see not only all of the work orders that exist within our account. We can see which of these work orders are open, which ones are in progress versus on hold, as well as which work orders have been closed. Now, what I can start doing is maybe I want to actually see work orders based by priority. I can go ahead and see all of my work orders that are of high priority. I can then actually click into each of these tabs and I can see a breakdown for my high priority work orders that are closed. What is the average time that it takes to complete these work orders? What are the total hours that I've actually spent? The money that I've spent, as well as the average cost per work order. Now, some of these numbers don't really make a whole lot of sense just by looking at them. That is because this is a demo account, so just something to keep in mind. We also on this bottom row can see how much money that we've saved, what are our planned work orders compared to our unplanned work orders. So again, we want to help your team move away from a reactive way of doing maintenance to more of a predictive and preventative way of doing maintenance. So if we can get this percentage number as low as possible, that means that we're basically planning our work orders ahead of time and we're not relying solely off of having to do reactive maintenance work. Now, with Business Plus, you also have access to custom dashboards. And so you have the ability to create dashboards that are specific to members of your team or maybe specific to actual teams in general. So maybe you want to have a dashboard for your plumbing team and then another dashboard for your electrician team. The idea here is that we're able to basically go into these dashboards, create custom modules that will basically show us specific information related to the KPIs that are maybe associated with that specific team or with that specific individual. So I could go ahead and create an additional module if I wanted to. I could group work orders by asset. I could create a custom module. So definitely a very powerful feature. And again, just keep in mind this is only available in Business Plus. All right. We also have our request tab. So if I'm an admin, this is where I'm going to be looking at all of the requests for work orders that are coming in. So we can see there's quite a few here. I'm going to be able to click into these requests. I can see all the information that's been left here. I can see which building location this request has been assigned to. A lot of these fields are optional in this case. So, in this case, my colleague Joe, who made this request, he didn't have to actually fill out the asset. If I wanted to, I could make that a required field, or I could hide it altogether. It's totally up to you. I could have also allowed him to, or I guess required him to assign a category and a main worker, a main worker. So we can see basically what I would be doing is I'd be going through this request. If it doesn't have enough information, what I can actually do is I can decline the request and send it back to Joe, just letting him know, hey, do you mind actually telling me which asset this needs to be assigned to? It's going to send that request right back to him. He's going to be able to make an edit to the request, assign it to that asset, and then request it again, in which case I would probably approve it at that point. So if I can go ahead and approve that, that's basically going to turn it into a work order. Then I can go find that work order and assign it to a technician, or I could even just assign it to a technician right here before I even approve it at all. So this is our request page. Just something to keep in mind is that as far as your requester users are concerned, when they log into Upkeep, they're not going to see any of these tabs here on the left-hand navigation bar. They're only going to see this request tab as well as our messages tab right here. So they'll be basically only be able to click on this request tab. They're not going to see requests that are coming in that don't belong to them. What they'll be able to do is basically create requests of their own. So they'll go in, they'll add in that request information, a title, a description, a priority, maybe take some pictures or upload some files. They would then go ahead and submit the request, and that request will then pop up in front of the admin on their screen, which is going to look a lot more similar to what we're seeing right here. All right. So let's actually jump into talking about our locations. Now, this is essentially where we're going to be managing those locations. This is where we're going to be adding new locations as well as editing our locations and adding more details to the descriptions of our locations. So pretty straightforward. Looks like we have a couple of different buildings located in Southern California. We have our Carlsbad building. We have an Encinitas building. If I actually click on this downward facing arrow, what it's going to do is it's going to show me all of the sub-locations that are related to this primary location. So I can actually not only specify this Carlsbad building, but I can then also specify the different floors within that building. So when it comes time to assign a work order, I don't only have to assign the work order to this building as a whole. I can get really specific and say, hey, you know what? Actually, this work order is taking place on the 3rd floor. Or maybe you want to break your sublocations down by different areas of a building or wings or different addresses that exist within a complex that you're overseeing. So you can get pretty creative with that. And in just a little bit, we'll go through some slides that show all the different use cases that we might want to be using sublocations for. So pretty straightforward. I can actually click into these locations. I can see which assets are associated with this specific location. I can see any files that have been associated with it. So maybe I want to have a floor plan or a map. I can see work orders that have been assigned to this location, parts, people and teams, and then I can even have some custom fields that I'm tracking as well. So maybe I want to add in a phone number field, for example. Totally customizable. You can add in whichever fields you want. And same thing goes if I actually click on my sublocations as well. All right, and then last but not least, you'd basically just go ahead and click on this big bright red button, just like we did for our work orders page and our requests page, to go ahead and create a new location from scratch. All right, now let's talk about assets. Now, with assets, it's going to be actually pretty similar to how we were setting up our locations in the sense that with assets, we have this concept of primary assets or parent assets, as well as child assets. So we can see here this asset right at the top in red here. I can go ahead and click into that. I can see all the details related to this asset. You know, what was its purchase date? What was its purchase price? I have a nice photo in here. I can see files associated with this asset as well. So maybe I have a spec stock, or maybe I even have a repair manual in the form of a PDF that I'm adding into this asset. I can see work orders that have been assigned to it. Any manual updates that have been made, I can always go ahead and type in my own update at the bottom here if I'd like. Parts that might be associated with this asset. Maybe they're parts that I frequently use on this asset. And then I can actually see other assets that are assigned to this asset. So in this case, this makes this a parent asset because it actually has child assets that are associated with it. So these child assets might be components or different parts that exist within this larger asset that I need to be doing maintenance on as well. And we'll get into that a little bit more in just a bit once we get back into our slides. Now, this is only available for our Business Plus customers, but you do have the ability to actually assign meters directly to an asset and see those meters here. I can see any depreciation related info. So again, like we just saw before, we saw the initial purchase price. I can also add in what the residual price is going to be at the end of life, and then we can see what the depreciated value is of this asset at this current time. This is going to help us make decisions around whether or not we want to keep doing maintenance on an asset that has a depreciated value, or if it's depreciated to the point where we should probably just buy a new asset altogether. And then again, with Business Plus, I also have the ability to track the downtime of my assets. So I can add in downtime manually. I can also track it in real time. But the point is that whenever I set an asset to not operational, or maybe I set it to offline, what it's going to do is automatically going to start tracking our downtime, our total downtime for us, and then giving us a percentage based on the split between uptime versus downtime. All right, those are our assets in a nutshell. We also do have the ability to view our assets in a card view, which is kind of nice. Let's go next into parts and inventory. So as you can imagine, this is going to be where all my parts and inventory are located. We can see that for each part, there's going to be an ID associated with it. There's going to be a quantity. I can actually set, as we can see here, I can set minimum quantities for these parts so that whenever these parts go below a certain level within my inventory, I'm going to get a notification letting me know that. I can see any files that might be associated with these parts, work orders associated with these parts, and even assets that might be associated with these parts. So pretty straightforward. Again, our parts and inventory, we do also have the ability to view that in a card view. Now with Business Plus, we have the ability to create purchase orders. And this is going to allow us to basically purchase new parts directly from the Upkeep app itself. This way, when my purchase order gets fulfilled, I can basically automatically update my parts and inventory with the number of parts that I just purchased. So if anybody has any questions about this, this is only available in Business Plus, just something to keep in mind. Now we saw those meters earlier and how those meters are attached into assets when you actually are on the Business Plus plan. If you're not on the Business Plus plan, no worries. Regardless, you do have the ability to access your meters here. And our meters are basically designed for any type of reading that you might be taking related to an asset. So maybe it's an odometer reading, maybe it's an oil temperature reading or an oil level reading. Really the sky's the limit in terms of how you can use your meters. The reason why we'd want to use our meters feature here is because maybe for this Ford truck, for example, whenever it goes over a specific mileage, I want to make sure that I have a work order that automatically gets created, letting me know it's time for an oil change and time for an inspection. All right. Our people and teams tab. Super straightforward. This is where we're tracking all of the people on our team. This is where we can group people into teams as well. So I might have a finance team, an IT team made up of multiple individuals. So very straightforward there. This is basically where you're adding people to your Upkeep account and assigning them to a technician role versus an admin or limited technician, a request or review only. Now, our vendors and customers is essentially like a Rolodex or like a directory that allows us to keep track of who our vendors are, who our customers are. We can assign these customers and vendors to work orders. So it's just a really great way to keep track of where money's being spent, where are we purchasing things from, and basically keep track of that within Upkeep instead of in a spreadsheet somewhere. Here we have our messages tab. And again, the great thing about Upkeep is that it's that one-stop shop where everything related to your maintenance activities on a day-to-day basis is located. So there's nothing worse than having a conversation with a technician over the phone or, by text message or maybe by email, and then trying to go find that conversation, essentially having to leave the Upkeep app, go into all these other email apps and text messaging apps that you folks might be using, and then having to kind of search for a conversation that you might have had a couple days ago, a couple hours ago, maybe even a couple months ago. So we really encourage when it comes to having conversations that are maintenance related, definitely take advantage of this messaging tool within Upkeep. That basically means that when it does come time to maybe go back and find a conversation that happened, you don't have to leave the Upkeep app at all. You can basically just go right to this messaging tab and figure out where it is. Now, I did bring up earlier that we have the ability to set categories to our work orders. We can create our own categories if we want. If you're on Business Plus, you have the ability to set asset statuses. So whenever an asset goes offline, instead of just simply saying that it's not operational, maybe you want to get a little bit more customized and create some additional fields that you're able to assign to that asset status. Same thing goes for purchase orders. So this just allows me to categorize my purchase orders, based on, for example, maybe these are purchase orders for reactive maintenance versus proactive maintenance or tool replacement. You can have as many of these categories as you want for all three of these fields. Our files tab, this is basically where we're uploading files into Upkeep and then assigning those files to specific work orders or to assets or parts and inventory or you name it. So again, we saw those Toshiba specs earlier. I actually just uploaded the file directly here and then I was able to assign it to that work order and to that asset. And then last but not least, we have our request portal. Our request portal is available on the professional as well as the business plus plan. Basically, what it allows you to do is create a public facing link that you can send out to anybody who you want to be a requester. This means that they don't actually have to log into Upkeep with a username and a password. They can just simply go to this link. They can make a request for a work order, and then they can also then use this second link here to actually track the status of those requests. So if anybody has any questions about that, definitely just reach out to us. It's on the professional plan. We'd be more than happy to demo it for you. And I know I said last but not least with our request portal, but there is one more thing I want to show, and that is that contact us button. You can see all I have to do is just click on that. It's going to bring up this window here on the right-hand side of my screen. This is where I'm going to be able to ask questions and get feedback from from our support team in real time. So you can see it. It typically takes us about a few minutes to answer your questions, so definitely don't hesitate to reach out to us. This means that you don't have to leave the app and go search for our phone number or go search for our email address on a website. You can just ask us questions directly from the app itself. All right. Now that is our quick rundown and general overview of the Upkeep web app. We also, of course, have our mobile app, and the first thing that you notice the first time you log into to our mobile app is that it's built to look almost exactly the same as our web app. So you're going to be able to see your work orders, your dashboard, aka your reporting, locations, assets, all of the different features that we covered are accessible through the mobile app. So definitely check that out. If you ever have to use that live chat support feature that we just saw a moment ago in the web app, on the mobile app, you would basically go into your settings, and then you'd see that there's a button for Contact Us, and that's how you could reach out to us from your phone. All right. Now for this last part of the webinar, as promised, we're going to talk about account setup as well as the best practices around setting up your account. So one of the things to keep in mind, as we saw when we were kind of just briefly going through locations and assets within Upkeep, is that there are those two levels of hierarchy built into locations as well as built into our assets. And you can see this is kind of the way we like to think about the organizational structure of your Upkeep account. Your parent locations are going to sit right up at the top of that funnel. These are your primary addresses, your primary locations where maintenance is happening. We then have those sublocations, which are areas essentially within that parent location. For example, zones, rooms, areas, floors, etc. Now, living in these sublocations, you're going to have your parent assets. Let's pretend as though our parent asset in this case is an HVAC unit. So that's going to be a core asset. And then within that core asset, we have child assets, which are components of that HVAC unit. So for example, maybe we have some compressors in there, maybe we have some wires, some fan blades, some belts. These are things that we want to be doing maintenance on that live within the parent asset. So without the child asset functioning properly, this means that the parent asset is not going to function either. So we want to make sure that we're doing maintenance on both of these components as well as our core asset as a whole. We also want to be able to do reporting on this. So I want to see the overall health of my parent locations based on their sublocations, based on the parent assets that live in those locations, and also based on the child assets, the components that live within those core parent assets. Now, if we go another step, we have our parts. Parts can really be tied to your locations, your assets, and even your work orders. And then at the very bottom there, of course, we have the bread and butter of Upkeep, our work orders. So again, our work orders can have parts associated with our work orders. Work orders can be assigned to child assets. They can be assigned to parent assets, sublocations, parent locations. So you can kind of see how this funnel works moving upwards, where our work orders are really the base of everything that's happening within Upkeep. And then we're going to be relating those work orders going upwards to our parts, to our assets, and to our locations. So one of the questions that we get a lot when setting up an account for the first time is, well, where do I begin? Well, if we actually go off of this organizational structure, probably the first thing that you'll want to do when you log into your Upkeep account for the first time is actually set up your parent locations first. Go ahead and set up those parent locations, add as many as you can in there. From there, once your parent locations are actually in the system, then it's going to be really easy for you to start adding sublocations to those parent locations now that they exist. Now, once we have our parent locations and their sublocations in place, next, we'd actually want to set up our parent assets. So we can go around our facility, figure out all the assets that we need to be tracking, as well as then once our parent assets are in the system again, it's going to be very easy for us to then start creating child assets and associating them to those already existing parent assets. And then last but not least, we can start adding in parts, and you can really start using work orders whenever you'd like. But you can imagine that it's going to be a whole lot nicer using work orders when you already have your location set up, you already have your assets set up, as well as your parts. So if anybody has any questions related to that, obviously feel free to ask those questions. You'll actually see that there is a questions box on the right-hand side of your screen. So feel free to type away and be more than happy to answer those questions for you after the session. All right, so we kind of, again, covered this already when we were actually going through a demo of the app. But one thing to keep in mind is that idea of primary locations and sublocations. You can actually see here some of the naming conventions that we've used to make things as descriptive as possible when it comes to naming and essentially labeling our locations. So in this case, for my parent locations, I not only have building 1 and 2, but I actually wanted to make sure that this is building 1 in Los Angeles and this is building 2 in Los Angeles. This is going to help confusion later on when I might have building 1 and 2 that exist in San Diego. If I only name this building 1 and building 2, then I'm going to have multiple building 1s and multiple building 2s. It's going to be a little confusing for our technicians. So it's always helpful to add in as descriptive nomenclature as possible. This is especially true for your sublocations. So you can see here with this sublocation, I know that this is the area where my auxiliary equipment is located, but I also denoted the fact that it's in zone 1 and it is a part of building 1. Again, for your technicians, this is going to be really nice when they don't have to scroll through a list of all the auxiliary location, or excuse me, all of the auxiliary equipment sublocations, just trying to figure out, okay, well, which of these is actually in building 1 in Los Angeles. Now, as far as the way in which you take advantage of the primary locations and the sublocations, it's really totally up to you. For some of our customers, they might just have one large facility, and so within that facility, they might have primary locations that exist, and then within those primary locations, they might have even smaller sublocations. In other cases, you might have multiple facilities, so it would make sense to make those your primary locations, and then all of the areas within those be your sublocations. And you could do it by floors, rooms, zones. It really depends on how your organization and how your business is set up. So this is just another example. The one that we saw before is the case where you might have multiple buildings kind of at different addresses. In this case, we have buildings that are essentially connected together, almost like a museum or like a hospital. And so we can see that we have building one. It does have its own sublocation here. Building two has a couple of its own sublocations. And then last but not least, building three. So again, just talking about nomenclature best practices, this is something we really like to harp on when it comes to setting up your account for the first time. It's always easier to do it the first time around than have to go back and change all the names of your locations and your assets after the fact. So on the left here, we can see we have our Carlsbad building, which has 2 floors. We also have our Encinitas building, which has 2 floors, and we've just simply titled them floor one and floor two. Now, the problem with this is that if I ever want to assign a work order to floor one, that technician is going to get that work order, see floor one, and not really know exactly which floor one out of all the buildings that they're managing. So they're then going to have to click into that floor one. They're going to have to see which location it's associated with it, and it's just going to take them that much extra time. Worst case scenario, they actually get confused and go to the wrong location altogether. So if we can just add that little bit more of description to our nomenclature and to our naming conventions, that's going to make your technicians' lives that much easier. When they then see that a work order has been assigned to Carlsbad floor one, there's really no way they could get confused as to, okay, which floor one is this? We see that it's in the Carlsbad building. I can then start working right away. Now, so far we've really just been talking about locations, but again, we want to do the same thing with our assets. So the way that we might be setting up our parent assets versus our child assets is again kind of totally up to you based on your line of business. In some cases, as we can see here, our parent assets might be large pieces of machinery, and then the child assets are actually components that are part of those large pieces of machinery. Now, on the flip side, you might not be an organization that's actually working with heavy machinery. Maybe you're actually doing property management. Maybe you're actually overseeing a hotel. In that case, your assets, your parent assets might actually be rooms that exist within the hotel, and child assets might actually be some of the couches, light bulbs, toilets, things like that that actually live within those rooms. So you can really get creative and really customize the way in which we're setting up these hierarchies so that you can get upkeep to work for you given your specific line of business. Now, again, just like we talked about with locations, as far as nomenclature goes for our assets, we want to make sure that we're being as descriptive as possible, obviously without going too overboard. So on the left here, we can see that we have a bunch of welder assets, and just put yourself in the shoes of one of your technicians. They're trying to assign this work order to an asset, and they have no idea which welder is which in this case. They then have to go back a screen, go into their assets, figure out exactly which asset that they're looking for, and remember that so that they can then go back into their work orders and select the right one. We can make those technicians and those admins' lives that much easier just by adding a little bit more descriptive information. So we can see here, just based off of this quick couple of added details to the name of this asset, I know that this welder lives in my Carlsbad building, and this is actually its serial number here. This is actually just an example, a potential asset labeling convention that you might want to adopt. Totally up to you. Again, you only need to add in as much descriptive information as is necessary to allow your technicians to know exactly where to go when it comes to locations, to allow your admins to know exactly which locations they're reporting on when they're trying to create reports and dashboards. And then same thing for your assets, knowing which assets are we working on, as well as which assets are we reporting on. All right. Now, last but not least, I do want to go through just a kind of standard workflow that we see work best for the majority of our customers when it comes to the work order process. So in terms of the work order lifecycle, generally your work orders are actually going to start off as requests that your requesters are actually submitting to be approved by your admin. So we can see on the left-hand side here that this process really begins with the requester submitting a reactive work order request that the admin then reviews. If there's not enough information in that request, they can decline it and send it back to the requester and say why. If there is enough information, that admin would then go ahead and approve that work order request, essentially turning it into a work order. That admin will then assign that work order to a technician, at which point the technician will actually get notified. Now, once that happens, this work order is in that technician's hands. So basically, that technician is going to start working on the work order. They're going to set the status of that work order to in progress. If something comes up and there's a blocker that prevents them from doing their work, they can set the work order to on hold. They might even want to leave an update saying why. And then eventually, once all the work is 100% completed, that technician can update the work order to closed. Your admins, as well as the initial requester who requested this work order in the first place, are going to get a notification letting them know that this work has been completed. Now, like I mentioned earlier, another way in which a work order can come about is actually with an admin or a technician creating a work order from scratch. So in this case, we're actually skipping the request process altogether. Basically, an admin or technician knows that something's broken. They go ahead, they create that work order right off the bat. They assign it to a technician. That technician gets notified, and the same thing plays out where a technician begins work on the work order. They use the statuses to say whether or not the work orders in progress or on hold, and eventually once everything's 100% completed, they update the work order to closed. Now, as far as that work order request process is concerned, again, if you are a requester user, you can go into the Upkeep web or mobile app. You would go into that request tab and basically create a brand new request, hitting that bright red button. You would enter in as much information as you possibly can. You'd click submit, and then that request is on its way to being either approved or declined by your admin. The other way you can do it is if you don't want, as an admin, to give your requesters access to the Upkeep app itself, you can also use that request portal, which is available in our professional as well as our business plus plans. Basically, as a requester, I would navigate to my company's request portal, just simply go to that link. I would do the same thing, enter in as much information as possible, click submit, and then that request comes through to the admin. Now, as an admin, I then see that request pop up in my queue. I can then review and evaluate that work order request information. I might even want to add some information of my own. Because I'm an admin, I can kind of delegate and select what the priority for this work order might be. I can select if I know what location or piece of equipment it might be assigned to. I'll then go ahead and assign it a main technician, assign it a due date, or put it on a schedule, and eventually click approved, and that request becomes a work order. Now, once that work order has been created, again, like I was saying earlier, that's really where it falls into your technician's hands. Typically, your technicians are going to be using the mobile app, and so we can see on our mobile screens here, this is basically how they would be interacting with their work orders. In this case, this is how a technician would actually create a work order from scratch. They would click on the bright red button, in this case at the bottom right-hand side, bottom right-hand corner of their screen. They would enter in as much information as possible, assign it to themselves, or maybe assign it to somebody else, depending on whether you're an admin or a technician. Once you've created that work order, or once you've received a work order and it's been assigned to you from your admin, you're going to be going into the app. You're going to be entering as much information as possible. You're going to be updating those work order status updates to in progress. You can use your timer to time out how much time it's taking you to complete the work order. You can add in parts and additional costs that might have been consumed over the course of completing the work. You can add in update notes as well. So basically from the app, what you would do is you would click on this updates option right at the kind of top of the screen there. And what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to actually enter in messages. A lot of these messages are actually being automatically captured for us whenever we change the status of a work order, or whenever we change the description or maybe some additional fields. Now, once you've started using Upkeep, you have all your locations set up, you have your assets set up, you're using it to create work orders and complete work. This is where building reports is going to come into play. And like I said, when we were on the work orders page earlier, a huge aspect of doing that is actually using the filters that are directly on that work order page. This is going to allow me to build specific filters based off of criteria to create custom views and reporting. I can save these filters for later use. If I have a filter that I really like and I actually want to export it, I can go ahead and do that as well. So maybe I want to create a PDF of a specific kind of work order, or export it to a CSV file, which is a fancy way of saying export it to a spreadsheet. You have that ability directly from the work orders page. Now, when we want to take it a step even further, that's where we get into those team dashboards that we saw. That's where we get into using our leaderboard, our dashboard, creating custom reports if you're on Business Plus, and really allowing you to get that insight into how your organization is doing. How much time is it taking for us to complete work orders? How much money are we spending on specific assets or at specific locations, and so on and so forth. And that just about wraps up our introduction to Upkeep session. So I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to hop on this session. I hope we were able to learn something today. Of course, if you do have questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. You can ask your questions right now on the right-hand side of your screen there by just typing away, and I'll be able to respond to you by email once we're out of this session here today. You can reach out to us, our support team, at info@onupkeep.com. You can give us a call. And you can also use that live chat as well. So, and also just keep in mind that a recording will be sent out. So if you'd like to share this session with some of your colleagues, please feel free. You should be receiving that recording in about 10 minutes or so. It just needs to kind of render there, and it'll be on its way into your email inbox. So again, thank you everybody for following along and for being here today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you again sometime soon. Take care.